welcome to Mom Jeans and Crime Scenes. I'm Trish, and today I've got kind of a story, kind of a discussion. It's one that you have probably heard about. It hasn't really been on the news a whole lot, which makes me really sad. Like, it really discourages me that I haven't seen it in the news at all, unless I Google it and actively pursue looking for it. I don't see it. That to me is just disgusting, but I have seen it in YouTube. I guess a lot of people have been doing videos lately. I haven't watched a lot of the videos. In fact, I've only popped in and seen a little bit of a couple of them, but I'm really looking forward to kind of really deep diving and seeing what people are saying about it. So a lot of what I talk about are things that came from news articles and things like that. So you may have already heard it, or you may have already I might be just kind of beating a dead horse here with it, but I feel like I have to share the story for a few reasons, actually. So I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, and my youngest is 3 years old. He's a little boy, and I freaking love him. He's so stinking cute. He's going to be 4 in 2 months, and so he's just right in between their ages, and I cannot imagine him being lost. I can't imagine him getting away. I can't imagine something bad happening to him. That would be the most devastating thing to happen to my family. I love him. And yeah, so I just feel like I have to talk about these little guys because I just feel it. I just feel them in my heart. Another thing too that really I guess connects me to their story, just really touched my heart more about them, is that they were foster kids who were adopted. So they had come from an abusive home, and they were removed from their home, and then they were put into another home. And the reason that really resonates with me is because I worked for the state of Utah with children who were taken out of their homes. In fact, that were immediately taken out of their homes. They would come to the facility that I worked in, and sometimes they would stay there for a couple hours. A lot of times they'd stay there for days, weeks, some of them for months. Some of them came back. And I just have grown to love kids who have come from these sad situations. I've seen some bad things. This age group in particular, 5 and under, I worked with 5 and under mostly. And man, they get your heart. I've rocked many little 3 and 4-year-old little boys to sleep. I sing songs, played Spider-Man. I have spent a lot of time with these little people, and so just to think about these 2 little boys, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I have to talk about them. So like I said, you're not going to hear probably anything new. You might hear some ideas that you'll be excited about. You might have the same, thoughts on things or whatever. Maybe my perspective will be different from yours or the same, and hopefully we can have some good conversations about that. But I just feel like I cannot not talk about this. So other stories I might not, but this one I had to. I absolutely had to, even though everyone else is too. So I'm excited to discuss it a little bit with you. So before we get started, let's kind of step into the scene to kind of figure out what's going on there. Orrin and Orson West, they were adopted by Trezell and Jacqueline West. So they went missing December 21st, 2020 at about 5:45 p.m. Well, at least that's when the police got the call. They were last seen sitting on the back patio with sidewalk chalk while their dad was getting firewood and their mom was wrapping Christmas presents. So they are both around 3 feet tall. They weighed 30 and 40 pounds, well, between 30 and 40 pounds, and they were both seen wearing black shirts and gray or black sweatpants. Yeah, I don't know. That's concerning to me that they're both wearing the same thing. Now, me and my sister are very close in age. We're 13 months, not even 13 months apart. And sometimes my mom would dress us alike, but it'd usually be special occasions. She just dressed us in what she could. The effort of putting us in the same thing, that's a lot. So I think about this, if you're going to tell a lie or make up a story, you want it to be as simple as possible because you don't want all these details that you have to remember. lying is hard to do, and then when you have like all these small little details and like what were they wearing, all these things, you know, that makes it hard. So it makes me wonder, you know, a little bit. I'm not saying that they're guilty, but I'm just saying that it's interesting that they're both wearing the exact same thing pretty much. It's easier to kind of remember that detail. Do you know what I mean? If you have a story to tell and they're both wearing the same thing, you don't have to remember two different outfits. Another thing that concerns me is it was so cold outside. Dad had to get firewood. It was that cold, and it was getting dark. In fact, yeah, we'll get into it. It was getting dark, so why weren't they wearing coats? If they're going to be out playing in chalk, you would think that they would put coats and maybe like a beanie or something on them, you know, to keep their little ears warm, maybe mittens to keep their little hands warm. I mean, maybe if they're doing sidewalk chalk, maybe you wouldn't do the mittens, but I would kind of bundle them up a little bit. So I was kind of surprised to hear that they weren't bundled. I understand when you have a 3-year-old that they can be, you know, they might have their own ideas about that, but my little guy, he's super stubborn, but he knows if he wants to go play outside, he's gonna wear his coat. So I don't know. I just think it's really interesting, but it was really cold out there, so I don't know, just wanted to mention that because I thought that was kind of a weird detail. But anyways, let's get into this a little bit more. So I want to kind of lay down some background on our little guys before we really dig into this. So they were placed with the West as foster parents in, I believe it was 2018. They were 1 and 2 years old, and then they were adopted a year later by the West family. The West family has 4 other children. 2 of them are their own children, and then 2 of them were adopted, or at least foster children as well. I'm trying to kind of figure out, I've read foster, I have read that they were adopted. It sounds like that they were adopted as well. So they had 6 children in total. Oren is 4, Orson is 3, and Oren has a leg fracture. It's an old injury, not something that was recent, that came from when he was living with his biological mother. So my belief, it being a leg fracture, my belief is that it's probably what's called a toddler fracture. And there's another name for it too. I can't think of it right now, but it's not super uncommon in little children, especially children under 5 or 6 years old. And it affects I believe it's the tibia, the bigger bone, and usually the smaller bone's not affected, but it's a pretty clean break. And like I said, it's pretty common. Like one way that you can get it totally on accident is when you go down the slide with your children and their like little leg gets caught, you know, while you're going down the slide. That can cause a toddler fracture. It kind of twists their leg. Actually, I think that might be what it's called, twist fracture, something like that. But anyways, also it can be caused by somebody grabbing the leg and maybe twisting it a little bit. So that's also another way. I don't want to sound super judgy, but that might be how he got that fracture. But yeah, so it sounds like there was some abuse going on, and the boys were removed from mom. It sounds like they have same mom but different dads, and yeah, so they were removed from their mom and they were put into the West home. Now, when children are taken out of custody and they're put in with a foster family, there's an extensive background check, and I would imagine all states. This is just from Utah, my experience in seeing this, and things have probably even changed since I was doing it, but the background check is pretty extensive. You're looking at, like, they do a really good background check, and it takes a little bit before, like, if you want to adopt, like, that's just a big long process. So I can guarantee that there was some kind of a background check. Lots of hoops, there's lots of visits, there's just kind of a lot that goes along with it. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that they're going to go into a perfect situation, right? So when I was working with a lot of the children in state's custody, we would have some that would come in from really horrendous situations, and we'd get them into a foster family, and those foster families also went through the entire process, and then months later, those kids would end up back in with us because of abuse from the foster family. So that's not totally unheard of, but it's just something to consider. Just because they do go through an extensive background check does not necessarily mean that they're going into a perfect situation, but the hope is there that they are. So the family moved to California City in September 2020. So they, California City, it's a pretty small population. It's a lot of land in the Mojave Desert. So I believe there's like less than 14,000 or right around 14,000 people there, but it's like the third largest city in California as far as the land goes. So it's really vast. But basically it's considered to be a ghost town, and it is no stranger to crimes like missing people. And yeah, I'm just really curious as to why they decided to move to California City, because like I said, there's just not like a whole lot there. So to me, that's really strange. So if you've heard that, if you've heard an answer as to why they chose California City, I'd be really interested to know. But yeah, there's a picture of California City to kind of give you an idea. It's just super duper vast. Yeah, and I just thought that this little sign here is kind of interesting. I just felt like it fits pretty dang well with what's going on. So yeah, just super vast. So getting into it, so I've talked, actually, I'm gonna kind of back up a little bit. So I was talking to my mom. She is this cute little true crimer. She absolutely loves true crime. So when I told her I was starting this channel, she was like super ecstatic. Hi, Mom. But she strongly believes that these little guys never moved to California City with their family. So I looked around, and actually this is not an uncommon theory. There's a lot of people who think that. So I think that it's possible she's right on the money with this. The pics that they used are old pictures of these little boys. So when they did interview the adopted mom, Jacqueline, she did say that she had pictures that were newer ones, but they're on the phones that were taken from her. So I don't know. In the interview, it's really strange. I will post a link to the interview because the whole interview is really, really weird. But her reaction after she says that was definitely really weird to me. But yeah. So anyways, going back to that, I don't know. It's just interesting. So I do wonder if maybe those babies did not end up going back to California or moved to California City. I wonder if they never made it. According to Cal City Police, neighbors that they interviewed never saw the little boys. In fact, in one interview, I believe he said none of the kids were seen. But then I've also read that some of the kids were seen. But it doesn't sound like all 6 of the children were there. 6 kids, you guys. And they're all pretty small. I don't have their ages, but from my understanding, they're all really small little guys. So I'm really, really curious as to why these little dudes were not seen by anybody. So I'm going to kind of work through some of my theories on this and kind of what I'm thinking. But I do think that those little guys probably did come to Cal City. I think it would be really hard when you have 4 children at home and 2 of them disappear. 6 little kids at home. 2 of them disappear. And trying to explain to them and then hope that they don't tell anybody that those little baby brothers of theirs didn't disappear. I don't know. I think that it would be really difficult to cover that up. And a few things too. They did bring some dogs to the house when they did their searches, and the dogs did, as far as I understand, pick up scent inside the home, although they did not pick up scent from outside. I am not an expert on dogs, so I do know that it's not like an absolute 100% sure thing. They could have picked up an old scent maybe. Who knows? But I kind of lean towards that they did end up in California City, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to find out that that might not be the case. One of the things in the interview that was really strange to me with the adopted dad is that he mentions that the boys are not allowed to go outside. They stay in the house because of COVID, right? They don't want their babies to get COVID, so, you know, their backyard and the front yard, like heaven forbids we go outside because they might get COVID in their backyard. Like, that's just really weird to me. But for some reason, they thought that, what the hell? It's almost Christmas. Let's let them play out with some chalk in the cold when it's almost dark just one time. And it happens to be that one time that the boys go missing when a gate is apparently left open while he's getting firewood. I think that's just a weird coincidence. Don't you think that, like, the one time that they're allowed to go outside, that they are, you know, that's the time that they go missing? Like, I just think that is super duper interesting to me, but I don't know. Another thing too that they mentioned is that the boys are not allowed to play in the dirt. So I will show you some pictures of the house, but the mom's like, they're not allowed to play in the dirt. So do not check the dirt because the boys are not in the dirt. Check the dirt. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I just thought that that was kind of a weird thing for them to say. But anyways, so before I get too ahead of myself, let's go back to where we were when the boys were playing with sidewalk chalk. It was cold outside. So it was so cold that the dad had to get the firewood. I've kind of already covered that. And he said that there was a lot of firewood in the area. And I'm looking at the area. I'm going to show you a map in a little bit. It's really, I'm not seeing where he's going to get his wood, but he's planning on going to get wood. So he left his babies outside in the cold while it's getting dark and he's getting wood. Okay, so my first question is this. They were wearing sweats. But we already talked about this. They're conveniently the same color sweats. That's really strange. And it was so cold that he needed to get firewood, but they don't have their coats on. Like, I know I already said that, but it's just, I can't get over that part, okay? And it sounds like they're going to be outside for a little bit, right? So why wouldn't you put coats on your kids? The mom's in there wrapping Christmas presents, which I would have just waited until they were asleep, but whatever. And it takes a little bit of time, so get coats on those kids. I don't know. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, I haven't seen a single interview. I've seen nothing about those Christmas presents, and I keep coming back to this in my mind. How many Christmas presents did they find for these babies? Were there any Christmas presents for these babies? So if you have heard an answer on that, I haven't seen anything. It's kind of like a no comment situation, so I don't know. Also, I still have questions, you guys. I always have questions. So did they find firewood? Was it freshly chopped firewood? Because I'm just trying to figure out where you'd find firewood in the desert. So was it like already pre-chopped, or did he go down and chop it, or what? So I'm just curious if they found anything that would like collaborate with that story. And also kind of trying to figure out a timeline of how long he was out there getting firewood for. So I don't know. I just feel like that's important. Also, did they find the chalk and drawings that support that the two little boys were out there? Because I've not heard anything that they did draw. Kids don't really have that much of an attention span to draw for very long. And also, like, my little guy would take his chalk for a ride and he would probably like find other things to draw on. So I do wonder about that. Did they find chalk anywhere else in that yard? That would maybe lead them to like which direction they would have gone in. Because I could totally see my little guy like taking his chalk with him and maybe drawing on other stuff or dropping it somewhere. So just kind of something to think about. But yeah, if I'm not sitting out there with them or one of my older kids or my husband engaging with my son, like, he's not going to sit down and draw pictures for very long. And the temperature was 33 degrees, which is cold enough that those kids need a freaking coat. And the sunset was about 4:45 according to weather.com. So it was, if the timeline's right, if they called the police at 5:45, then it had already been dark for about an hour. So it's really weird. Like, why would they be out there playing sidewalk chalk in the dark by themselves? But anyways, so the dad goes in the house, and on the way in there, he sees the boys playing with their sidewalk chalk. He says he's in there briefly. He comes back out and the boys are gone. He goes back in and he asks Mom, have you seen the boys? She states the absolute obvious, that they're outside playing with chalk, which he should know because he was the one that was out there with the chalk with them. But they're not out there because Dad was just out there and they're not anymore. So now the first thing I would do is send my husband to go look around the yard, and I would search the house high and low just to see if they got in there and I didn't see them, if they're hiding. Like, I would check that house and make sure that they're not there. Then after that, I would like start being frantic. Okay, I'd be like absolute frantic. They were just outside. They could not have gone far. So they were on foot. One of them has a fracture. I'm not sure how it's still affecting him. Is he able to walk fast? Like, those are just questions I've got. There's 2 little boys. How fast could they be? So I would be on foot. I would be running up and down the street. I'd be checking every neighbor's yard. I'd be pounding on doors. I'd be looking in backyards. All of these vast areas that are open, I'd be checking these like open fields, I guess you could call them. I would be looking absolutely everywhere, and I would be a frantic freaking mess. So now I understand that there's a surveillance video from a neighbor, and I haven't really watched it. I have heard about it. I've been told about it, and my understanding is it's kind of a long video. I can try to track it down, see who's got it, and I'll post a link so that you can watch it. For me, surveillance videos are kind of tough because you can't always see the full picture. You can't always see, especially when it's getting dark. So without it being enhanced, it's really hard to know, and I think that sometimes people like to look at it and see what they want to see. But what I do understand about this video is that there are a few things to note, and these are coming from people that I trust their intuition on these kinds of things. The boys are not seen in this video, not a single time. And I guess the video has a pretty good shot of what the front yard looks like. So if the boys were to get out and go in that direction, they would be seen going out. So those boys should be on that video if they in fact got out. Okay. It does show the dad going out to look, but there's no sense of urgency from what I understand. There's not a frantic mom looking for these babies. They search around for a few minutes, and then the dad jumps into his van and he drives the opposite direction from what the surveillance video is at. Okay, so from what I understand, that there's like fields on both sides of the home. He doesn't even look at this the side where the surveillance video is, the field there. He doesn't even go that direction. He goes around. He's gone for about 6 minutes. Super extensive search, you guys. 6 whole freaking minutes that he goes and looks for those little boys. It still doesn't really make sense to me why he's in his van, because there's 2 little boys on their feet. How far have they gotten? Like, not very. They're probably in that little neighborhood right there somewhere. But he gets in his van and he goes and he drives. He's gone for 6 minutes. And he comes back and yeah, so I think, I don't know, maybe he realized that like being in the van is kind of a bad idea because, you know, they're not going to be super far away yet, right? So he comes back and he doesn't really like, he's not really searching still. He doesn't go over onto this other side where that field is yet. He's not looking at that. They call the police, and from what I understand, they don't really search while they're waiting for the police to arrive. And according to the police chief, he said that their response was about 5 minutes from the time that the call came in. And the only time that you really see Mom on that surveillance video is when she comes out to talk to the police, and then she walks away and is no longer seen on the video. But yeah, she's not frantic. Like I said, I would be like, you would be seeing me all over, and then you see him and the police go back down the same direction that he went the first time, ignoring the other way. So it's really, really weird to me. I'm going to pick up really fast to show you kind of an aerial view of that neighborhood. So you can see on Aspen Avenue is what street I believe they are on. So you can see the whole street. He only goes one way. So this is kind of an area, what the area looks like. I believe that you can kind of see the gate, if I'm understanding, the gate where they would come out of. And then this, I believe, this would be the side, if I'm understanding how the surveillance was set up, this would be the side that they don't search. But if I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, you guys can totally tell me. Just be nice about it. But I do believe that this is the field. It's a big field. Like, why aren't you searching that? And then that's the other side. So, I mean, where would these little guys have gone? It's really weird. So, and then there's an aerial view of the house. You can kind of see that funky driveway that they have. And then you can see on both sides how it's just got like empty lots there. So I can't imagine those guys, little guys, getting super far. I mean, you can see where that gate comes out, you know, on that side, and maybe that's why that focus is more on that side. I'm thinking that's how it's set up. But I would be searching everywhere. So I don't know. I just thought that was really, really weird. Yeah, so I don't know. They avoid that area. I'm not sure if it's because they know that the boys aren't there, or if they are like freaked out that maybe the boys are in that little field. I'm not really sure, but it is really weird that they don't seem very interested in that area. But anyways, so the community, they rally together, and they search everywhere for these guys. And literally hundreds of people are just touched by these little dudes, and they come out and they search, and they're just really great to help. And this whole time, the police keep mom and dad in the house, and they tell them that it's just best that they do not go out there to search. And they're already having all these great people looking for these kids. And they work with the parents at this time, getting pictures, info. You know, this is a really critical time. This is a time that the police can kind of observe what's going on. There's, you know, definitely, you know, listening to the conversations they're saying. This is, you know, when people are making up a story, they tend to give information that's not necessary. So they add too much. So this is one of those opportunities for police officers to hear that and recognize that. So it's important to keep those families home. Also, another thing too that I think is weird, or that you need to consider too when you've got something like this, is if these little boys are found, you do not want mom and dad out there. You do not want mom and dad to see that. It would be just absolutely traumatizing. So I think that that's another reason why they're advised not to go search. I would be a wreck. It would be really, really hard for me not to be out there searching for my babies and trying to figure out what happened to them. It would be so hard for me to not be out there looking. But then, you know, you have to do what's right in an investigation like that. And so, anyways, I don't know. I would have a tough time. I can understand. But at the same time, I remember I helped with a search. God, it was a few years ago. And there was a little girl, she went missing. She was actually the city right next to mine, a small little town right next to the one that I lived in. And she didn't come home from school. Hours later, still not coming home from school. So they rallied together and did this big, massive search for her. And the parents were not there. And I did not think for a second that was weird. A lot of people think it's so weird that these guys weren't out searching for them, and that immediately makes them guilty. But sometimes it's most important that they are helping the police in a different way. So as long as they're cooperating and helping that, I think that's super important. But yeah, so those parents weren't there. I didn't feel like it's weird. I didn't gather from anyone else in the community that it was weird. But yeah, so just FYI, she was found and she was okay. She just went with a friend and did not tell anybody. So thankfully she was found. But so they don't find these little boys, obviously, while they're searching. And the police, they go in and they get a search warrant of the house. And they start kind of start searching. So that's a picture of the house there. So you can kind of see the outside with those stuffed animals. People just love those babies, and it's just sweet. Okay, so the police get a search warrant and they start to search the house. They bring in the dogs. They get a little bit of the boy scent. I've kind of already talked about this on the inside, but not the outside. And they do take evidence with them, but they are very hush-hush. They also come back and they dig in the backyard. So this is just a picture of the holes that they dug in the backyard. So you can kind of see that. From what I understand, this is what they call probing, and just kind of seeing if it's possible that maybe the dirt had been touched or anything prior to that. So you can kind of see those interesting little holes there. It sounds like they did take evidence from this, but again, like I said, they're not talking a whole lot about what they do have. So it's one of those things when you have when they start digging holes like this, they have to get a search warrant. Obviously, they have to put in an affidavit. This was explained to me by my buddy. They do an affidavit. They give it to the judge. The judge looks it over, and if they feel like there's a good cause, a good probable reason to be able to go back in and to search, then they will execute a search warrant. They will sign a search warrant, and then the police officers, they'll come back and they'll get a chance to execute that search warrant. They give a copy of the search warrant to the family or the person that they're searching. And yeah, so there's a reason that they got this. So whether it's to kind of rule it out maybe, or maybe there's something, some information, something that made them decide that they needed to dig there. There was a good reason to be able to do that. So it's kind of one of those things they don't let you just do willy-nilly. So yeah, super important to think about that. And it's interesting. And I know that they came back and searched a couple of times. So if they go back and search and dig more, I think that will be really, really telling. So we'll see what happens with that. So they had a private investigator named Bill Garcia who came in to help with this a lot. In fact, he had some leads. I believe, actually, before we get into it too much, I do believe that Bill Garcia was voluntary. He's kind of doing this on his own. And he did have a lead where he talked to somebody who saw the boys, or thought they saw the boys, at an Albertson store with 2 other men. But it doesn't sound like they were really able they were able to for sure validate that story. Also, they did some searches in, now I'm going to say this wrong, is it Tehachapi? You guys, I'm going to say it wrong. I'm sorry. But they did some searches, and doesn't sound like anything panned out with that either. But he really just believed that we needed to be searching like the desert around there. A private investigator has since removed himself from the case. I understand it's because he didn't feel like he was appreciated by law enforcement, which I have mixed feelings on that, because I can kind of see the two sides. I can see how maybe a PI would get in the way of an investigation and how that could be frustrating for law enforcement. But I also think that if there's harmony and teamwork there, then a PI could actually be like super instrumental in helping solve crimes. And they have different rules that they can kind of sneak around. And law enforcement, they don't as much. Like they have to, I don't know, they have to be a little bit more careful. There's amendments and things like that they have to like make sure that they are in line with. But private investigators don't necessarily have to follow those as much. So I think that if they can harmonize, that it could be a really great team. I think having different ways to investigate a case like that is super beneficial, as long as everyone that's doing the investigation, they're very clear on the boundaries and what should be released to the public and what should not be released to the public, and making sure that everyone knows how to handle, like if they come across evidence, how to handle that evidence so that they don't mess up a case. I think that if people are able to do that, I think that it could be like really harmonious. But what I know. But also another thing too about it I wanted to talk about is YouTubers, and you've got people from Facebook groups or different groups on social media who are really, really into investigating these things, and they're just really good at it too. And I think that that's super important. I think that we're gonna see more and more of that, and helping law enforcement come up with conclusions or think in different ways. Law enforcement, they're trained to think in certain ways. So I think sometimes it's really good to have somebody who comes in who has a different thought process or might see things from a different light. That is going to be so important. I think that there's going to be training on that for law enforcement, if there's not already, on how to handle that kind of investigating, and people who want to do that kind of investigating. I do think that when you're if you're a YouTuber, or you're, just want to kind of get to the bottom of this on your own, it's super important to remember that law enforcement are trained to de-escalate situations. They're trained to have their head on a swivel, to kind of acknowledge different things in their environment that could be potentially dangerous, that maybe we wouldn't necessarily recognize. And so, yeah, you just have to be really, really careful if you're doing that kind of thing. And I think that that's important, because otherwise you might end up, in trouble yourself. So just something to think about, being careful, because law enforcement, they are trained to handle these situations. And also, if you come across evidence and you handle it wrong, you could ruin the evidence. It could be thrown out in court. It could just completely ruin a case. So you definitely want to make sure that there's no tampering or anything crazy like that going on. But yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to mention that, because I totally get it. I want to do the same thing. Like, I want to interview the people, and I want to, track down the evidence and all that fun stuff. But I'm not trained, so I gotta be like smart about that. And so we all do. Bad news. So I just wanted to just say that really fast, but I think that it's going to be super beneficial. So recently there was an interview with the police chief that I felt was pretty interesting. I'll play it. Actually, I will post a link to it, because this is getting kind of long, but it seems almost like they have no idea of anything. Like, they don't name suspects, they don't have a person of interest or two people of interest if you catch them up thrown down. But I don't think that necessarily means that they don't have a suspect. They're just not naming a suspect out loud. And I could be wrong about that, but I think a lot of times they keep those cards to themselves. They don't want everyone to see their hand, and it's important. There's like a method to their madness on that. So just because they say they don't have anything, or they don't have a clue, there's a reason that they're not leaving that house. There's a reason why they're not like expanding their searches so much. You're not seeing that with that law enforcement and the FBI and all the agencies that are involved. There's not a whole lot of broadening out from there. So you got to look at what they're looking at. So there's a reason that they're staying close. So that's just kind of my opinion on it. But I just wonder, what they're thinking. Also, another thing too is that they do have the parents' cell phones. So that data, surveillance videos from neighbors, all those things, they're working right now to figure out what happened. I'm really, really, really curious to see what the timestamps on those phones are for pictures, like when the last pictures were taken. I think that will be really interesting to hear, because like I said, right now we just have these older ones, but if we can find some that are like, from right before Christmas time, that would be kind of give them a time limit, I think, better. So right now, as far as we know, they may not have even come with them in September. So another thing too is I want to hear the 911 call. I have not seen that it's been released. If you have seen that it's out there, please let me know, because I want to hear it. I think that is gotta be super interesting, because when I'm looking at this interview with the parents, it was so strange. Yeah, I just, it's so weird. We could like go through that, like it's 13 minutes long and it's crazy, and we could go through it if you want to sometime, but there's no emotion, there's no pleading, there is no like crying. I can tell you right now, and I know that like, hindsight's 20/20 or whatever, I know me, okay, and I would be a freaking mess if these were my babies. Even if it's a week or two later that I'm interviewing, I would not be okay. I would feel like so much guilt in my heart that I failed my babies and they got lost. Like I would just be overcome with guilt. And I would have to have somebody holding me up. I don't think there's any way I could talk to the media. I think I'd just be a complete disaster. And there's no emotion. And I think the interview took place like 2 days later. Zero emotion from either of these freaking people. It's just so strange. They're not pleading for somebody to bring their babies home. Or at least I don't remember hearing pleading. If there is, I'm going to have to re-listen to it. But I don't think I remember hearing them even say that they plead for their babies to come home. Another thing, too, is that he describes the boys as rambunctious, which I think is just a strange way. He says that they will be rambunctious. It's weird to me. Like, why would you describe your babies that way? It's almost like they're just kind of like setting like the tone, like, hey, if you find these babies and they've got injuries, it's because they're super rambunctious and playing with each other hardcore. Like, I just think that it was just a weird, inappropriate way to describe those little guys. They're going to be scared. If you find those babies, they're going to be scared. They're going to be frightened, right? They're probably going to be crying, which there were no little boys walking in the cold, crying, scared and alone. If these little guys got out and it's dark outside and it's getting cold, they're going to start crying. You would think somebody would hear them. But anyways, there's none of that. So I think that's kind of interesting, right? And like I said, he said he only went into the house for a minute and came back out and they were gone. Realized that door was open. How far could they have gotten? Like, you're probably going to hear their little chattering. You're going to hear them. At least, I don't know. That's what I think. So the dad, he keeps his arms crossed throughout the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. The mom, she's rocking herself like back and forth. Her eyes are dodgy. There's no emotion. It's really weird. Your babies are freaking missing and you're not crying. Like, if you were to put his behavior and her rocking, do you know who you get? You get Chris Watts. That is the interview you get. There's like not a lot of emotion there. There's like a little fake emotion, which you might get that a little bit from dad, but you get zero emotion from mom. Zero. Even when she's talking about like people coming in and helping, I would be, just that alone, I'd be so overwhelmed because there's people helping me find my baby and that they're loving my baby as much as I am right now. And they're invested in my baby, like, and let alone 2 babies. Like, I don't know. It's really, really strange. They talk about the babies are rambunctious and that they're here, that they're going to be around here in this area. How do you know that? You don't. Your babies are missing. You have no idea where they're at, right? Like, you don't know, right? So yeah, they're missing. So I just thought that was kind of a weird thing that they said. I don't know. I guess, like I said, I'm just a brat, but I just felt like that was kind of just a weird comment from mom and dad. So anyways, I just want to know what you think about this. Do you think that they wandered off and got hurt or got lost? Something to think about with that is, like I said, nobody hurt them. You would think that they would get cold, that they'd be crying, something, right? Do you think that they were taken? Maybe it was a crime of opportunity from a bad guy. From what I understand, there's sex offenders in that area, kind of a lot of them. So maybe that's something to think about. Do you think that there was foul play? The chief does say in an interview, I will also try to post a link to that interview, that he does suspect foul play. In fact, I think that was one of the first interviews that I had heard, was him saying that they do suspect foul play on this. So, yeah, I think that's interesting. So do you think the chief is right? Do you think that there was foul play? And if so, what do you think? What do you think happens? So, there are 4 kids that were taken into custody. They're considered siblings at risk, I believe. So, I don't know. We don't know what happened to their little brothers. And I think that it will be interesting to hear, if they're put back into the home with mom and dad. I think it's safe to say that they have been interviewed, and they're probably going to be interviewed more and more, and they're probably being observed in their just environment with their friends and in whatever situation they're in. they're going to be observed by people to see their behavior and kind of see what they say. Kids are really tricky to interview because they get their information mixed up. They get these details, and they might have the details correct, but they get them wrong when they mix them up with other details and with dates and things like that. So it's really hard to interview siblings, but I'm guaranteeing that has happened. There's probably been a lot of interviews that have gone on, and they've been really delicate with that. But I don't know. Do you think they ever made it to California? Because none of the neighbors have ever seen the kids, so like ever. So maybe, I don't know, maybe they didn't make it to California. So I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about this case. Actually, I do know how I feel about this case. I just don't want to be super judgy or soapbox. I don't know. I could just like rant on and on about what I think about two people in particular and their behavior here, and how I would feel if my babies were lost. I just feel like maybe their actions are a little inappropriate. But you know, not everyone is going to react the same way as me, so I got to remember that. But I do think it's weird. I'm interested to see how this progresses. I really hope this won't be a case that goes cold. I really hope that they are able to find some answers, and hopefully find some answers soon, so that we can get those little boys home. And they've got people who love them. There are people who love those babies, who need them brought back. The last I heard, there is a $100,000 reward for them. That's a lot of money. And I think that if somebody knows something, I really hope that $100,000 will really talk them into talking. And hopefully, you know, that'll be enough incentive to get somebody home, get these little boys home. So anyways, if you have information, I'm going to post down in the description information to get a hold of the police department. But I hope to see these boys make it back home. It's super important. Like I said, this story just sits with me, and I'll probably do a couple more if you guys want me to, in updates and stuff like that. Because like I said, I feel like I can't not. And I'm not one to like do stories that everyone else is talking about, because you know, you've got like the Vallow case, and you've got Suzanne Morphew, and they're so important. They're so important. These people are so important, but they've got these great channels who are really putting their story out there and really fighting to bring them home. And while I totally follow it, I love all of it, I just don't do the stories because I have nothing that I can offer to the story that is going to bring new information in. And I want to be a voice for people whose stories aren't getting out there. Yeah, so, but this story is completely different. I know that there's a lot. I probably said nothing new, but I just feel like I had to do it because of the circumstances. So anyways, I'm glad that you're here with me. Thank you so much. Hopefully this video turns out really good. I did something a little bit different, using a different program and using webcam, and the lighting in here is kind of tricky, but hopefully it worked out and you guys stuck around with me. And yeah, I appreciate you guys. So anyways, have a good night.